Hello, my name is Dr. Ernesto Lee. I want to ask you if you remember the days when it was just you and your trusty ChatGPT. You asked ChatGPT a question, and in return, you got a neat little answer. And it all felt, kind of very straightforward, kind of like a two-player game, right? There's one human and there's one artificial intelligence. Now, what I'd ask you to do is I'd ask you to stretch your imagination just a little bit. I want you to imagine multiple humans and multiple ChatGPTs all working together, but they're all working together to solve a singular problem, a singular challenge. The power of collaborative thought kind of magnified. It's like upgrading from a duet to kind of like a full-blown orchestra, so to speak, with each player bringing their own unique skills to the table. And also, what if part of that challenge involved code? Well, we've been there, right? Wouldn't it be a game changer if one of those chat GPTs could actually churn out code? We all know that it can do that, but what if it could churn out self-correcting code so that it would automatically identify bugs that often plagues, kind of the code that you get with chat GPT? I say all of that because AutoGen from Microsoft, it kind of amplifies this idea that we're talking about and kind of gives you this multi-agent framework, and one of the agents even writes self-correcting code. The technology is called AutoGen. That's the name of the technology, and I'll show you here. We'll install AutoGen. We'll do a pip install pi AutoGen. We'll give that a second to execute. And then after AutoGen is installed, it'll take a second. You can see we're in version 0.1.13. So obviously we're very early on in this process here, right? So there we go. A couple of a single error, a couple of warnings. We'll be fine here. So I'm going to next. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in the list of GPTs. So what this is saying is that I will operate with GPT-4, this specific version, GPT-4 with this version, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So this list does not exist yet, right? So that list does not yet exist. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do, the very next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create that list so that we actually have all of the GPTs and the keys to connect them. If I go here, this is what the config list looks like. And obviously you would have to put in your OpenAI key there. And if you don't know how to get the key, all you have to do is, obviously you have to have an OpenAI account, and in your OpenAI account, there's a View API. There's a View API link over here that you could use. I'm just going to log into my OpenAI account. You go over here. It's just personal. Where's that? View API keys. And that's it. You just go in, you create yourself a new account, a new secret key rather. You give it a name. In fact, here I'll call this AutoGen, and I'm going to delete this key, so don't worry. So I'll create this key, then I'll delete the key. I'll copy the key from right here, and again I'm going to delete this key. So I don't need a bunch of comments telling me that my key is available. So you just add your key there, and technically you don't need the rest of these. You could use Azure OpenAI if you want to, but here is the connection to ChatGPT-4. All right. So what I'm going to do now, just in the interest of time, is I'm just going to plop the code in here and explain it really briefly. It's amazing just how few lines of code you need with this framework. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an assistant agent. This is going to be my large language model. This is going to be my ChatGPT. This is going to be my programming assistant. And I'm going to name my programming assistant Assistant. So this is going to come from ChatGPT. I want the temperature to be 0. I want it to just give me code. Don't try to be creative. If I set the seed to 42, it's going to cache it so that if I make the same call twice, it's not going to go out and charge me for multiple API calls. It'll just go into the cache so that I have consistent, reproducible results, and I'll minimize the cost. Okay, and over here, so this is my ChatGPT based, my large language model programming assistant. Over here, I'm going to create effectively a human proxy. That's what this is. This proxy represents me as a human. Okay, so what I can do is I can say, when do you need human input into a business process? So that's what this is here. We're creating a human proxy. Okay, so the working directory, I'm going to call it coding. So you'll see a coding directory that'll pop up over here. Get this out the way. And then lastly, I'm going to initiate a chat. And I'm going to pass in the message, what date is today, and I want you to do a bivariate analysis of, let's say, Google stock, or it doesn't really matter, Google stock. Here, how about we say Meta stock since the beginning of the year. So I'm a data analytics faculty member, so this is a classic data analytics use case here. All right, so from here, what you'll see is this is the user proxy, that's me, talking to my large language model assistant, and I ask it two questions. I said, what date is today? And I want you to do a bivariate analysis of the Meta stock since the beginning of the year. So if you notice here, you can see what it's doing now. It's going in, it's doing its work. All right, so the very first thing that it does here, sorry, let me get this right, is it says, hey, let me get the current date, and I'm going to use Python. And I'm going to create the code. So it literally creates the code for you. Notice I said it was going to, remember I said it was going to create a coding directory because we said our work directory is going to be coding. So it generates the code to solve the problem. Next thing it's going to do is going to use the shell to instantiate. It's going to use this Y-Finance module. So it recognizes that in order to solve this problem, it needs Y-Finance. So it's going to install Y-Finance, the Python package Y-Finance. And then after it does that, it's going to pull everything together to try to give us a solution. All right, but here's the key. All right, so it tries to execute the first code block, which is Python. The first code block is this right here, getting the date. It tries to execute the second code block, which is going to be a shell script, which is just basically going to tell it to install Y-Finance. And then the last thing it's going to try to do is going to try to run the final piece of code that's going to pull everything together and solve the problem. But when it goes to do that, the execution fails, right? And here's the key, right? Here's the beauty in this. The beauty in this is that it recognizes that, hey, there's a problem, there's an error when I tried to run this code. It's going to recognize what it is, and it's going to say, hey, this error occurred because of this. This date time module was not imported. You can see there's the error. And it's going to take it upon itself to correct the code. And so you can see here, the import date time has now been added to the code. And then it's going to run through the process again. And then when it runs through the process again, right, you can see that's going to execute the code again. And the code has executed successfully. And if you think about it, this is probably one of the biggest problems that developers have. You ask ChatGPT, give me a piece of code. ChatGPT gives you the code. You copy that code. You put that code in a Google Colab or IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code or whatever, and then the code fails. And then you're copying the error, putting that in ChatGPT, Googling it, whatever. With AutoGen, you can see it's self-correcting code. Right now, of course, it's not perfect, but it's leagues better than what you have by just asking ChatGPT a question, and then you're in the middle in that loop trying to fix code.